Hello everybody, welcome back to Writing the Rapids, the show where I, Joe Bielecki, talk to writers about writing. Very often those writers have been recommended to me by writers who have previously been on the show, or it's a Rejoinder episode, which this is. We are once again joined by Paul Cunningham, who co-manages Action Books. He's the author of 2 poetry collections from Schism Press, Fall Garment from 2022, and The House of the Tree of Sores in 2020. He is one of the collaborators featured in Katarina Ogard Jensen's Ancient Algorithms from Sarabanda Books from 2025. His writing has appeared in venues like Diagram, Denver Quarterly, Baham Magazine, The Texas Review, Bat City Review, Quarterly West, and many others. He's a coordinator of the International Network for Comparative Studies and sits on the board of Nonfiction Now. He currently manages the MFA in Creative Writing program at the University of Notre Dame, where he also teaches. We are talking this month about his newest book, Sociocide, at the 24/7. Before we get into my conversation with Paul, let's remind you that you can help out the show in myriad ways. The money ways are patreon.com/noisemakerjoe. For just $2 a month, you can get these podcasts a little bit earlier than everybody else. You can also toss me a couple bucks on paypal.me for a one-time donation. You can buy my book. It's called Tired. It's pretty good. The no money ways are word of mouth, however that means to you, liking, subscribing wherever you're listening. Spotify and YouTube lets you comment, so maybe comment, and otherwise, Signal Boost. Remember when people used to say Signal Boost? I sure do. All right, let's get into my conversation with Paul. I said off the air, I'll say on the air. I really enjoyed this book. The experience of reading it was nice. I think it's incorrect to call it belligerent, but there is a sort of wilding outness to it that I appreciate. In the acknowledgments section, which I'm finding as a podcast host, interviewer type person, is always really useful to dig into. That's a little tip for any budding interviewers there. You said the book is full of noisy voices and zany optics, which I thought was a good place to start. We've talked before when you were on last time. We talked about IKEA and we talked about fashion. And this time I have a feeling we're going to be talking about gas stations and social media. So start with the nexus of this book. Where did it start for you?
I think it started in 2 places. I think one, I was thinking about kind of meditating on poems set in a gas station in some unknown gas station on the outskirts of Los Angeles, someplace where non-spectacular things were happening, but perhaps surrounded by quote-unquote spectacular things, whether that's different celebrities or icons or up-and-coming actors who want to become icons, who want to become celebrities. Something I've just been thinking about for the last couple years is just what it means to be an influencer, what it means to influence, what does it mean to aspire to that? What does it mean to have a presence, an online presence, a YouTube channel? Some people think I sound a little wacky or not, but like I have never, no matter. I'll just use my own YouTube account as an example. I have never felt compelled as someone who has a YouTube account to comment on somebody else's video, especially some famous musician's video, and say something like, "Awesome video, Brittany. I love you. I heart you." I've never felt this. But it could be a local newspaper too, and articles will have a comments forum. I've also never felt compelled to comment publicly, but many people do feel compelled to engage in these threads or forums I don't really use Reddit much, but I definitely used Reddit to compose some of this book. But as far as the noisy voices, I was definitely thinking about influencers. What does it mean to want to be famous? I'm not on TikTok, but I watch TikTok videos, and sometimes it's unfathomable the number of views certain videos will get. Um, Anything from like mukbangs to reaction videos. We're at a point now where there's like reaction videos of people watching mukbangs. So that's where I guess the zany optics come in. I've as far as I've been incredibly influenced by the life and work of Jonathan Crary. It began with a book I read called Techniques of the Observer, and kind of pairing that with Guy Debord's Society of Spectacle. I am really interested in techniques of looking, the act of looking. I love film, as I'm sure I talked about the last time I was on in conversation with you. But what does it mean to be a male filmmaker? What does it mean to be a female filmmaker? What does it mean to be a woman of color who's a filmmaker? What does it mean to be a queer woman of color? What do different gazes do? So that was something else I was thinking about in terms of optics and the gaze, and what does it mean to look? So that's kind of the first part, is this gas station, right? Like the purpose of a gas station is to fuel. What fuels you? And this language of fuel. It's kind of also the language of capitalism and the language of influencers. It's the language of wellness culture too, which is something the book touches upon, for better or worse. It's kind of you said belligerent, and I've had people react to this book. People have said, maybe it does have a more belligerent tone. Several people have told me that they think of the book as quite fun. But it is I do go after everyone in this book. I go after the the wellness coach who preys upon the most vulnerable and tries to manipulate people who prey on people's insecurities. But I also go after self-indulgent narcissistic personality types in this book as well. But the second part is the book opens with that quote from Andy Warhol, which is, "I always thought I'd like my own tombstone to be blank, no epitaph and no name. Well, actually, I'd like it to say Figment." And the Andy Warhol grave in Pittsburgh, PA, that grave is under 24/7 surveillance. It's a project affiliated with the Andy Warhol Museum called Figment. And so you can watch a live stream of Warhol's grave at any point. You can watch it right now. There's a constant live stream of his grave. And when I discovered that, I got really hung up on the word figment. I started looking up. I looked up the word, the etymology. It's I love how close the word figment is to fragment, and that kind of reminded me of the way Crary talks about the kaleidoscope in Techniques of the Observer. He believes the kaleidoscope is something that can fragment individuals, can fragment iconicity. And if you fragment iconicity, if you turn what's iconic into the fragmented, then maybe you disrupt the status quo or stasis or whatever is considered normative. But I also, in my research about Figment, I also discovered there was a very unpopular Disney mascot named Figment the Dragon, who was part of some Epcot dark ride, I believe called Figment. the Imaginarium with Figment, something to do with Figment and the imagination. I can't remember the name of the ride. Um, but I found video footage of Disney Imagineers testing out different prototypes of Figment the dragon to see to see how audiences responded to different models of Figment the dragon. So I was thinking about Warhol. I was thinking about imaginary friends. I was thinking a lot about childhood, Willy Wonka, the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder's in this book as well. Um, so I was thinking about childhood, Figments, the fragmentary, imaginary friends. Um, so those were things I was thinking about before I started writing the book. And so, and this book was written in the summer of 2022, I believe.
Hmm.
And yeah, I have some references to Cybertrucks and some Musk and stuff in this book. But I find it fascinating when some things definitely have aged strangely, interestingly. But that guy who kind of suicide bombed himself in Vegas not too long ago, prior to Trump. I think it was just prior to Trump's most recent election. I believe his name was Matthew Allen something. He was apparently a Trump supporter, but when he blew himself up in the Cybertruck, he apparently said Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. So again, that's something that this book is interested in is spectacle, as I mentioned earlier, and violence. Maybe
Yeah.
a digital violence.
Digital violence for sure. Um, the use of all caps throughout, I think maybe was what brought the word belligerent to my mind, which I still maintain is like an incorrect term, but I loved it. I feel like I don't see it a lot, and when I do see it, it usually feels very alt lit, which it doesn't in this book. It feels very YouTuber yelling at me, right? I feel like Laura Kaczynski has some all caps in some of her poems. It's like not a lot, but enough for me to remember it. But yeah, I guess that's part of what like the high energy ness of it is, which if we're thinking about influencer cultures and TikTok and whatnot, like you must be high energy. Like it feels like even the cozy YouTubers my wife and I watch, there is still an element of like the clock pushing on the performer, even if they're not screaming into the camera at me. It's like, well, I have to get this video out this week. So like, I ran into a problem with my project on day 3. Now it's time to like really reconsider. And it's like, I mean, I know you promised your Patreon people that you'd have the video out by Friday, but like, come on, girl, chill out. Like,
Right.
you're the one doing this. And of course, those same women who I will say that to, I also like say, oh, it's Friday, it's time for another Rachel video or whatever. But yeah, I just kind of loved how the text feels like barely containable. Some of the shorter poems don't have all caps, and then I'll turn the page and it'll be mostly all caps. And it feels like the book itself could have been written in its entirety in like the time it took to read it. Like it felt like jazz in that way. Like it was just like coming out at me as I'm experiencing it.
Yeah, I wanted it to, I wanted it to feel, I wanted it to feel like you had wandered into a YouTube comment thread. And there are several poems that do sample directly from YouTube comments. I don't know if that necessarily makes it flarf or post flarf or whatever, because I don't do it throughout the book, and there are things that are, I can't find it, but at the moment, but there are things that are just absolutely fictional, even when I'm using an I, or if you even want to think of, I don't know how one might think of if there's a lyric I in these poems, but there's at one moment I say I got lost in an Epcot as a child, and that's not about me, and I was never lost in an Epcot. I was never lost in Epcot as a child, but a lot of these poems are sampling. Not all of them, but and then a poem like the poem that appears on page 35, the how do I search for an image poem. That's completely me going back and forth with possibilities in the Google search engine. And so I would just type out how do I, and I would wait and see how it would possibly fill in the blanks. And there's things that don't even, at the time, didn't even make sense to me. But yes, at one point when I got to a person is, and so I typed a person is, and one of the first or second suggestions for a person is, one of the suggested search items was septic. A person is septic. I mean, that's not even me. That was suggested by Google search, this Google search engine. So poems like that were just completely me experimenting with, almost a collaborative poem writing experience with the Google search engine. But I will also say, just because I'm sure somebody is wondering, but no AI was used to write this book.
Being published via diagram notwithstanding. Are people still mad about that?
I think people are still mad at that. I was very much a steadfast defender of Lillian's work, and I've always been a defender of Lillian's work. But we do live now in an interesting time where you'll see literary journals. I'm seeing now in submission guidelines that no work that's even used AI, just work that's used AI in any capacity is just not allowed.
Yeah,
but
I mean, that's very much a teacher punishing the whole class because a couple kids are being naughty, right, sort of thing. I remember I had on Doug Lumen and Lychee Fan shortly after, like inspired by the uproar over Lillian winning that diagram contest. And I wonder how much it holds up now, that conversation, because I certainly maintain you don't hate AI, you hate capitalism, sort of thing. And I think people thoughtfully using technologies in interesting ways is a good thing for art. But I will not argue that most people using AI are using it thoughtfully to the benefit of art. So I am not going to be the person who's like, no, you shouldn't completely ban it like that. Like, no, I think, I think it's fine to quarantine that for a decade until we figure out how to make the billionaires obey us, and then we can reevaluate how we want to use what is essentially a sophisticated word randomizer to help us do things. Because I don't know, my sort of low stakes from my position point was like, well, what? Like, you know, I was given a gift as a young budding writer by a family member that has like dice, and you roll the dice and it's like a horror story with a woman protagonist, and then you roll another dice and it's like,
Yeah.
and it's 400 words long or whatever. And it's like, well, that's not a human deciding. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That is a me tangent. My official position is let's not give these people any more money, and just chill. And also maybe chill with the whole, I've been seeing stuff, people being like, you know what? I think our parents were right about television. I think television is just bad. And I'm not there yet. I'm not there with like the internet was a mistake. We should go back to telling stories around the campfire or whatever. But I have been, and I'll stand by this, that Lao Tzu's saying that like the world should be filled with kingdoms of like 100 to 150 people and nobody ever leaves their own kingdom, is probably one of the better ways to construct the entirety of the human population, and we should consider that. So all of that together, take what you will. I'm really sorry that this has nothing to do. I do want to go. I want to reel myself in here.
No, yeah, no worries.
I want to go back to what you were saying about grabbing YouTube comments, and you said that you used Reddit. And I'm thrown off because I haven't heard the term flarf in maybe a decade. And now
I don't even know if it's relevant anymore. And then I saw there's something called post flarf, so I don't know what that is.
I can't keep up. I remember watching like Vanessa Place, like videos. I don't know if she was like talking at conferences or doing readings or whatever, like talking about conceptualism in opposition to flarf and as like a better mode of doing poetry. And all of this was like way beyond my pay grade at the time and is still probably beyond my ken these days, which I find just kind of delightful that there are people hyper academicizing poetry like that.
Yeah. Well, there's an even, if you ever have spare time, I would recommend, there's a great book by Felix Bernstein called Notes on Post-Conceptualism. So, I would recommend visiting that book. But I think conceptualism now today is very different than that Vanessa Place, Kenneth Goldsmith era that you reference. I think we have a conceptual poetry now that's more diverse. There's more diversity in voices, and also, and like Ed Steck, I think, is an example of a contemporary poet, a contemporary conceptual poet. Maybe Mike Correo is an example of a contemporary conceptual poet. I'm not sure what Mike would think about that, but I do think we're in an era of new conceptualism, and I know Steve Tomasula just put out an anthology not too long ago, kind of trying to look at contemporary conceptualism, what it used to be, and where it's going. I think it's just called new conceptualism, but.
Fascinating.
But I don't know what this book that I've done, I don't know, I don't know what this is. And I'm sure someone with, I think anytime you start talking about sampling internet language, the F word might come up.
Yeah.
But I did not set out to write a flarf book. So.
Okay. But what was the process of digging through the internet like for you? Was it more treasure hunting, saying I'm going to go on Reddit and find some stuff, or is it a more organic notebook by your phone as you're scrolling and then writing down something?
Yeah, I think more organic. There were times when there were poems that I already kind of had the frame for the poem. I already knew what I wanted the poem to do, and then I would just kind of sift through language and take what I felt was relevant. And in some ways, towards the end of the book, there are moments when I just inevitably your own personal self, my personal self, does come through, um, and it's hard to not let that happen. But there were moments that felt more like drag, like the bro poem that happens on page 40, um, where I just started moving from video to video to video, aka comment form to comment form, looking for any language that used the word bro or began a sentence with bro. Sometimes I would just watch a live comment stream,
Mm.
on some live video, and it moves really quickly. It moves so quickly. And so I would also sample language like that, very in the moment, but never really any intricate plan. Very spur of the moment. Um, and that's why I think so much. That's why I think the all caps appears so frequently throughout the book, because I kind of wanted to recreate that experience of seeing of participating in a live stream where all caps does suddenly pop up. And I'd be watching like a live soccer match coverage or something, but you would see comments, and it's like zero point 0.5 seconds each comment, and it's just like a seemingly infinite scroll. But you would see comments about the game, and then you'd see comments like "fuck Trump," fuck Harris," "fuck Trump," "fuck Harris," and just over and over and over again. And then that would die out, and then it would go back to soccer. So I kind of wanted to recreate that unexpected surprise of all caps, or maybe a lot of exclamation marks. Um, and it's interesting. Again, something else that escapes me, something I've never participated in, is online gaming. I'm fascinated by it because you could be a 35-year-old. You could be a 35-year-old and in a serious conflict with a 12-year-old, on Halo Online or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by what the internet does for performance, how you can perform yourself, and what kind of selves do you perform on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um and I I wonder if there are people, and it sounds like you and I are maybe these types of people who don't have a very different in-person self from an online self.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
I do occasionally comment on videos or whatever, or kind of like, unbidden reply to something that otherwise doesn't have very much to do with me. And it's always often around the same time that I am making an effort in person to be more outgoing. So I will, like, in the same span of time that I'll leave a YouTube comment on a video I like or whatever, is probably also me complimenting the cardigan at the Barnes and Noble of the person who's checking me out or whatever. Like, it's very much like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, I don't know, this is maybe base psychoanalytics, but there are people for whom feel more themselves or comfortable or whatever online to be more boisterous or whatever, or to have those selves. there's a meme that floats around where it's like, people who play role-playing video games, why aren't you, who don't play an evil character, like, why? And the responses are always like, well, because my idea of a power fantasy is just like helping everybody or whatever. And like, for me, I do feel guilty if I'm playing a video game or whatever and like make the evil choice or whatever. If I'm not already in a bad mood, the idea of like playing Baldur's Gate 3 as an evil character is a compelling idea, but also feels like there would be a heavy emotional lift on my part going into it, where I have to be like, okay, I'm gonna try to be evil here. Like, even the character I made for my playthrough that I'm doing now, like, it's very much just like, well, what would I do in this situation, and not what would this drow cleric do in this situation with these groups of friends. It's like, well, what would Joe do? What would Joe say? And Joe would probably try to be helpful. So I guess we're going to try to be helpful. So again, I feel like I went off on a huge tangent, but I don't know. Maybe that's how this book works, is that it just shoots you off into different directions in kind of the same way that the internet does.
Yeah, the kind of, not quite the penultimate sequence, but the longer sequence near the end of the book that mostly is focusing on different celebrities. So that's another example. All of that language, it's the poem on page 41 that begins with, I don't know. Every single line in that poem is something I took from a YouTube comment. But there was absolutely almost like a map behind the crafting of that poem. And so there's Beyonce in that poem, there's Miley Cyrus, there's Timothée Chalamet, there's Lady Gaga, there's Kanye West or Ye, there's Adele. So it's kind of a collage of real reactions to different celebrities, and the reactions are often positive and negative. But yeah, in a way, it's not necessarily a mosaic of outrage culture, because it's not just outrage. There's positive stuff in there as well. But I am interested in the internet as echo chambers, and I thought it would be interesting to write a poem that dwelled in different echo chambers. People, it could be something as innocent as someone that likes Adele and somebody that doesn't like Adele. But there's nothing in that poem. There's no single line that is something that I wrote. Everything is found comments in that particular poem.